Here's yours.
Thank you, David. Great introduction. And yeah, today we're going to talk about not specifically anything when it comes to AI models or capabilities. We're going to kind of talk about what's been happening in the industry for the last 12 months, even the last 4 months. Things, it's been in the news. You've been talking about it with colleagues, hearing stuff everywhere. But stuff has really changed just in the last few months. It's really accelerating. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. But really the talk about the conversation we're having is something big is happening. Let's talk about what that means. So just a quick background on me. Actually, I'm a hydrogeologist. But when I started my career, I was doing numerical modeling in hydrogeology. So I had a computing background, and I've had that computing background throughout my career, developing analytical database systems for the environment industry, doing project management applications. For the last 15 years, I've taken off my scientific hat. I've had my corporate advisory hat on, working with small and medium enterprises across the engineering and environmental industry. And as David mentioned, in the last 5 years, I've been focusing a lot on AI, what's been happening and its integration into our work. And really, one of the inspirations for today's talk was a blog post written by a young guy named Matt Schumer. And he wrote this fantastic blog post last month. And you may have seen him. He's been on some of the American news channels. And it was a great post. And I really liked it because it captured my feelings from what I was seeing as well. So he's a programmer at an AI startup. He's been working for his own AI startup, working there for 6 years. And really, he has this claim that things seem overblown, but we're in this massive transition phase. And a great quote he had, he says, right now he goes to work, he tells the computer what he wants to do, he leaves for a few hours, and he gets production quality software done in just a couple hours, completely done by the AI. So he's kind of saying we're at this transition. And I love the model that he gave. So he made it analogous to COVID, said back in February 2020, if you remember, we kind of heard some stories about something happening in China. There was a new flu, bird flu, what was happening? And then 3 weeks later, we're all fighting for toilet paper at the grocery store, trying to find hand sanitizer. Like the world had changed. We were home for months. It was that transition was quick. Matt's point is we're kind of in that transition phase right now at this point in March 2026 when it's coming to AI. We all kind of hearing these stories in the news. AI seems to be dominating. Some people may be getting sick about it, but there's some massive changes that are coming in the next few months and few years. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about is what are those changes we're going to be seeing? And then maybe at the end, how do we keep up as professionals? So now, as part of my role, I have many roles. I work as a corporate advisor. As a corporate advisor, I work doing project management training. I work doing AI work. One of the things I also do is run a conference for engineering and environmental executives across Canada, and we meet in Vancouver every year to talk about issues that affect the industry as a whole. And the last few years, I've been talking a lot about AI. I do benchmarking for the whole industry, but talking to these executives saying, AI is coming. And I want to give a small snippet of the presentation I gave the executives just 12 months ago. And to try and frame it for them, I wanted to say, imagine we're on this continuum from really dumb machines like an abacus all the way to general intelligence, like the HAL computer from 2001, right? And there's a continuum there between these. And we're kind of advancing year by year, getting closer to this thing we call artificial general intelligence. But I said it's important to realize there's kind of three sections along this transition point. There's where we are currently, where the actual software, where the actual capabilities are. And then there's what people perceive the capabilities are. Some people think AI is far more powerful than it currently is, and some people think it's actually less powerful than it currently is. So there's our perceived capabilities. And finally, there's the promised capabilities, what the AI companies are telling us what's coming. So I think it's very important to be aware of all these. And they're not just points on a line, they're kind of distributions, right? The capabilities vary with different models. There's some people that think AI is not as good as it is, some people that think it's better. David and I were chatting about this graph. Like a great example of this are these AI agents that you see everywhere on these websites. You know, you go to a website and there's a little chat agent, and these things have generally just been terrible, right? You fight with these chat agents, and all you want to do is get the chat agent to connect you with a human because it can't solve your problem. Well, just in the last few months, and you're going to see this, I think, this year, these agents are getting good. They're getting very good, and they're getting good to the point that actually you're not going to want to speak to the human. You're going to want to speak to the agent because it's going to be able to solve your problem. It sounds crazy, but that's kind of happening right now. And these are kind of the changes happening kind of everywhere AI is being used. And one of the things I talked about last year with the executives at the conference was the pace of change. So there's all these benchmarks when it comes to AI, and this was one of them. This was what it was the ARC AGI score. And basically, it was saying, how close are we to artificial general intelligence? So you can see the different versions of Chat GPT going from GPT-2 to GPT-3 to GPT-4 hardly making a dent in this benchmark. Like these models, they were becoming pretty capable, but as being generally intelligent, very poor. And then, just as I was starting to get my presentation ready for the conference last year, GPT-4 had come out a few months before, and 4.0, which was a really good model, actually just retired last month. But it was a really good model, and it started doing useful work, but not really capable of thinking. And my presentation to the executives there were saying, you know, these models can do a lot, but they can't do engineering work. They can't do scientific work yet. 2 weeks before my presentation, OpenAI released a series of models. They released O1 model and the O1 preview model, and then they use these models to help train the next models in quick succession within a few weeks. And this happened. These models became very smart within a couple of weeks. All of a sudden, these models could do scientific problems. They could do engineering problems. They could do math problems. They got very smart very quickly. And actually, you may not be familiar with these models, but these are the thinking models that are now in ChatGPT 5. So if you're using ChatGPT 5 and you see all of a sudden it says thinking, it's using these models to help it do it. Now, of course, we're not at AGI yet. They've actually redone this benchmark, but you can see the rapid progression that we had just in that period. And that's been happening over the last 12 months. But let's look back over the last 4 years, just how fast things have changed. So back in 2022, we had, I think, ChatGPT 2. We were transitioning to maybe 3. It was unreliable at even basic arithmetic. It was a fun, almost party trick. You could have it write poems and stuff, but it really wasn't a useful model. A year later, that party trick turned into a model that could pass the bar exam. It was like, wow, change was happening pretty fast. We moved to 2024 and we had those thinking models, right? The O1, the O3, the models that could actually think out problems. These are the models that started writing software and good software, starting doing graduate level science, which just the past year would be unheard of. In late 2025, the real big transition that had happened, and Matt was talking about this in his blog post, is that most of the top engineers working at programming companies have handed over their coding work to AI. They are no longer doing programming, sitting there typing out code. They're writing in English saying, this is what I need you to do, and letting the AI do the programming. And this is happening everywhere. And just in the last month, there's been some new models that really make feel like we're almost in a different era, even compared to what we had before. The important thing to remember is that each of these steps represent a big leap in capability that the previous year seemed impossible, right? So that's really important to think about when you kind of look at this industry. And going forward, when you will talk about some of these claims that are going to be made by these industry executives, by the presidents of these companies, they seem outlandish claims, but there's a good possibility that they may be right based on this history. And, with my work colleagues, with people that I work in the industry, in the last 4 months, I've kind of knocked up my rhetoric a little bit. Not even the 4 years, but in the last 4 months, I've seen some really significant changes. So, just for example, in November of 2025, Google had released their model called Gemini 3 Pro. And it's interesting. I talk to people, and a lot of people don't even realize that other companies have models. They think, well, isn't it all ChatGPT? I'm like, no, many other companies have models. And Google has one. Their ChatGPT is called Gemini, and it blew everyone away. It was better than every other model out there. It beat all the benchmarks, beat all other models, and it really caught the AI community off guard. It's like, how did Google get ahead so far, so fast? Obviously, Google has almost unlimited cash, and they have been pouring that cash into training these models and their AI research. So this really caught everyone off guard. And really, the talk a few months ago was, how will people catch up to Google? They seem so far ahead. Later that month, the company Anthropic, which you've heard a lot about in the news, them getting pulled, their contract pulled with the U.S. military based on their moral stance. That's a whole other topic for a different webinar. But their model is called Claude, and they have a few different versions of Claude. And they released the Opus version of Claude in November 4.5, and it was an amazing model for especially for programming. Coders couldn't believe how well this model was doing, and it stood up and challenged Gemini 3 Pro. Well, just the following month, OpenAI, who makes ChatGPT, they released GPT 5.2 to kind of compete with these other models. And Sam Altman, the president of OpenAI, actually put out a memo when Gemini 3 was released, and he called it Code Red because he thought, oh my goodness, we're falling behind. These competitors are actually ahead of us. At least for the model releases. Now, internally, they have stronger models, but they said we need to get these stronger models out on the market so we stay competitive. So 5.2 was released, very good model as well. So we had all these super strong models coming out just in a matter of months of each other. And then something really interesting happened. This is a story. I don't know if people are familiar with Anthropic's Claude Cowork. That was released in January. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit. Anthropic had their programming product called Claude Code. They released that about a year ago, and it was a tool to help programmers write computer code. And it was in the command line. So obviously a tool that's not friendly to most people, right? We're all using PowerPoint, Excel, our mouse and pointer. There's very few of us working in the command line, but programmers like that. So their tool worked in the command line. And this Claude Code was a fantastic programmer. Using Anthropic's model, it really accelerated not only AI development, but software development in general. And it made programmers' jobs so much easier. So much so that, companies like Microsoft, most of the programmers at Microsoft, spoiler, are not using Copilot, are not using those other tools. They're using Anthropic's Claude to do programming at Microsoft because it's so good. Well, one day a marketing person walked in the group. All the programmers are sitting there. They have their terminal windows open, but he noticed something strange and he asked the programmer, what are you doing? He says, oh, I have Claude Code sorting my wedding photos. And he's like, what do you mean? Well, Claude Code, even though it's a programming agent, it's a general agent. It's smart. It's just like all these other models. It can do all sorts of work. And another programmer said, yeah, I was at a conference last month, and here, Claude Code is sorting my receipts, all my expense receipts, and doing my expense report. And this marketing guy was blown away. And he said, can we make this tool, out of the command line and for the general public? Because it's really cool. So from that day, they released Claude Cowork, which is a browser-based tool or app-based tool that you can use in Windows and Mac, and you can point it at a folder and have it do some really neat work. But from the moment that that marketing guy, asked the question, they released that product in 10 days. 10 days. That's all it took to go for them from that concept to release that product. And they put four programmers on to build Cowork. They didn't write any code. Claude Code wrote 100% of the product for Claude Cowork. So from a neat concept to an AI product to something that was out in the field and working, even though they called it a beta, it was fantastic. I've used it many times. It's a great tool. That was done in 10 days. That's how fast stuff is moving right now with these tools. And then just last month, we had new versions of these latest models from Anthropic, so Opus 4.6, and um, OpenAI released their kind of coding competitor to Claude Code, GPT 5.3 Codex, which is an excellent programmer as well. And it's funny, they were released within 10 minutes of each other. So the pace is moving so fast. And I made the slide 2 weeks ago, and it's already out of date because Google has released Gemini 3.1 Pro, and it's better than all these models on this page right now. So these models are getting faster. The releases are coming faster and faster, and each release they're becoming significantly better. So this idea that I had, we have these current capabilities, these perceived capabilities, and promised capabilities think in the last 4 months, these have really slid closer to us getting to much, much smarter computers. So obviously the current capabilities have moved ahead, but I think that they've moved ahead further than the general public really realizes for the most part. And these promise capabilities now are getting to the point where we're going to have these artificial general intelligent agents available to us not in decades, but in years. And it's really going to change how work's going to be done. Another interesting one of these benchmarks, and I don't want to get it into too much detail, but it's basically a benchmark that will tell us how long can an AI agent work on its own before it starts failing, right? Because they always make mistakes. And if an AI makes mistakes in a long chain process on a bunch of tasks, then those mistakes will compound, right? And then you'll get kind of gibberish out. So really this benchmark says, hey, how long can an AI work for and have a 50% chance of it completing the task successfully, right? Well, if you go a year ago, an AI agent could work about 10 minutes to get the task success about half the time done, right? But doing expert work, like not simple work, hard work, whether it was programming, legal review, you name it, professional work, right? So it could work for 10 minutes on its own, which wasn't bad before it needed some human intervention. Well, we come up to November of last year, that's now at 5 hours. So these models, these either programming models or Claude Cowork or these other agents now can work hours on tasks, right? And there's a good chance that the task is going to be done correctly after they're done, which is quite amazing. And we're seeing this trend double every 4 to 7 months, and even accelerating. So I'm going to put on a graph. Here's this metric on a graph. And again, it shows the amount of time on the left-hand side that these models can work, again, autonomously and, half the time get the right answer. And you can see there's a big uptick when I talked about that O3 model, right, that had come out. And it was doing very, very well. It could work for almost 2 hours on its own. And then GPT-5 came out. It could work for 3.5 hours on its own. Claude Opus 4.6 from Anthropic came out. It could work for almost 5 hours on its own. And even the latest version of GPT 5.2, working for almost 6 hours on its own. You kind of see this graph taking off, right? And just last week, they benchmarked that new model I talked about, Opus 4.6. So you go from 4.5 to 4.6. What does that mean? Probably not a lot. Well, here's Claude Opus 4.6 on that same benchmark. It could work 15 hours almost on complex tasks, right? And a good chance of that task completing successfully. So these models can work for longer and longer times and give better and better professional results for the tasks they do. And it's only accelerating, and it's accelerating very quickly. And the CEO, excuse me, of Anthropic, Dario Amodei, had said basically, we're on track for substantially smarter AI that's substantially smarter than almost all humans at almost all tasks on track for like 2026, 2027. It's kind of stunning when you look at that statement. It's kind of profound. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, and it seems fantastical. But again, if you go back to the leaps that we've made in the last 4 years, there's a definite possibility of that. And maybe just one point, it's really happened in software engineering now, especially in the last few months. And the question is kind of why? Why was it happened so quickly with software engineering and not in other professional services? And the reason is because software engineering is what we call benchmarkable, which means they have deterministic tasks, right? When you write a program, it either works or it doesn't. So you have a clearly defined right answer. Did this program give the right result? Did it make the menu look right? Did it process the file properly? So what happens is these AI systems can be trained on these, but automatically they can work 24/7 on programming problems and learn about what the right answer should be and get far better at programming. So, this is why, when it comes to things like math, like science, coding challenges, standardized tests, AI now is moving quickly from doing a pretty good job to being superhuman. Like, that is stunning, right? Because they can just know what the right answers are if they get it wrong, and they can quickly learn. Again, we're talking about uh, hundreds of millions of dollars of compute and test going into this, but these models are getting better very fast. Now, the one thing, like even a few months ago, that I had noticed still is, hey, AI still struggles at those judgment tasks that we do as humans, right? It's really good at doing a lot of stuff, but man, sometimes it just makes stupid mistakes. And the judgment that we have as professionals is just not there in the models, right? So that was kind of the thing that, okay, we're getting much better at many tasks, but they still need their hands held, basically, right? That kind of changed for me over the last few months. I was noticing that these more recent models are getting close to something like judgment. And I was getting quite shocked at how good they would be doing at some of the professional services work that I do. And what was interesting is that article by Matt, he identified the same thing I was getting, this seeing in these models, the same feeling I was having. Here's a quote. I want to read it from his blog post. And he's talking about, using the latest programming model to do his work. He said, but it was the model that was released last week, and I talked about this one, GPT 5.3 Codex, that shook me the most. It wasn't just executing my instructions, it was making intelligent decisions. It had something that felt like, for the first time, like judgment, like taste, the inexplicable sense of knowing what the right call is that people always said AI would never have. This model has it, or something close enough that the distinction is starting not to matter. And, it was stunning to him. And I think people using some of these new models for some of their professional work are seeing this, going, wow, these things are getting pretty good. Again, they're not taking any professional jobs away right now, but we can kind of see that on the horizon. And that's kind of where we're at. And these models are in a self-improvement loop, kind of accelerating those curves on how good they're getting. For example, when, just last month, when OpenAI released this GPT 5.3 Codex, again, this is that programming model that's so good. When you look at the technical documentation, they always release something called systems cards with these models. So you can go in and look about how it was developed, what are some of the issues, where the model is succeeding in some points, where are they failing. They talked about how they actually used the model itself to help create itself, which was incredible, right? And also, Anthropic has talked a lot about that lately. Again, the CEO has stated that, much of their own internal core code right now is written by models, and we're in this feedback loop, gathering steam because the models are writing the code faster and faster and getting better and better. There is an excellent panel session at the last Davos conference with Dario was in there, and also with the head of development of Google, and they were talking about this self-improvement loop. And I encourage you. I think it was about 2 months ago. Go find the panel session with them at the Davos conference. It's about 45 minutes, but it's excellent. But one of the things they talk about is they both feel that they're going to be closing this loop with the models this year, next year, which means not only for the coding work, but for all the kind of general learning, is the models are going to be improving themselves. And what this means is we see this fast change of pace. It's only going to get faster once they close this loop. And now, what does this mean for us in our careers? Like, what is the scale of disruption that we potentially could see? Again, I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but there's a lot of signs pointing that disruption is coming. Well, one of the predictions made by Dario, again, the president of Anthropic, is 50% of the entry-level white-collar jobs will be eliminated within 5 years. And there's many people in the industry that said this is conservative. So it's kind of concerning, right? It's something we need to pay attention to. And there's a big difference between this disruption and disruptions that we've seen throughout history. When ever since the Industrial Revolution, we've seen technology disrupt industries. But the thing is if we get this general AI working as well as we believe it will, and it can do almost all cognitive work, then there's really no domain for you to go out and learn something new when it comes to a thinking skill, because all those are going to be taken by AI and done well. So it is a little concerning of what's happening right now. Again, you know, the that disruption has been seen in the software industry, but there's other sectors that will be transformed, right? So, for example, the legal sector, AI is so good when it gets the right context in language. So, it's very good at doing contract review, drafting case law. Now, there's classic examples of people misusing it wrong, and that's why you need to understand how to use these models. But there was a stock market crash. What was it? About 2 months ago or so. That crash came for the sole reason that Anthropic, the company that makes Claude, released a plugin for their model that could do legal contract review. And it was really good. And the crash came because so many people in the industry didn't realize how good these models are getting at some of these things. And it's like, oh my goodness, there's so many professional services, so many huge law firms that, this is really going to impact their business. It was a big kind of wake up call. But they're used in finance, in doing data analysis and doing models. Obviously, writing content, they're very good creative writers, which is one of their Achilles heel as well. They could make stuff up. You have to learn how to use it so they don't make stuff up. But if you need marketing, if you're doing journalism, even technical documentation of work, they're just fantastic at that. As I mentioned, software engineering, it's completely changed in the last 6 months at the highest levels of these companies. Again, you look at a product like Claude Cowork, that might have been a 6 month or year project for a programming team of 20. It was done by 4 people in 10 days and released as a successful project. So it's really sped up the pace of development. Obviously, there's going to be use of AI in medical analysis, customer service. As I mentioned, that example with AI chat agents, I really think you're going to see a difference in the next year or two in these agents. And you're going to get to the point where, yeah, you're not going to want to deal with a human. You're going to deal with the agent because in a couple of paragraphs, you can describe what you want and your problem should be taken care of. That's coming. Now, to look at this from a different perspective, there was this great report that came out in 2025, and it talked about the state of AI in business. This report was done by MIT, and they looked at hundreds of companies. And you can Google this one online. It's an interesting report. They call it the Gen A divide, the state of business, excuse me, the state of AI in business in 2025. But the conclusion of the report was shocking, and it goes against almost everything I've told you right now. It said 95% of organizations are seeing zero return on their AI investment. So, how does that relate to everything I've talked about? Well, you have to remember in the field of AI, the summer of 2025 is ancient, it's old. There's been so much that happens with those models in the last 7 or 8 months that has made this report almost invalid. That's how quickly it's moving. But another thing, um, and they identified this, the traditional IT approaches to implementing AI are failing. So if you're at a big company and you're trying to implement a new system, the programmers and IT department might spend months, almost a year developing this new system. They're going to spend months trying to test it and then a couple months implementing it, right? And that's how traditional IT approaches work for these large firms. And that's failing because, if you're trying to introduce a new system, you're basing it on a model that's basically ancient and objectively so much worse than the current models of the day, right? So stuff is moving so quickly that how IT used to work is just not working anymore for implementing software and useful software for people to use. What they did identify, though, and we're seeing this now all the time, is they called it this shadow AI economy. Those are the people in the offices, they have their personal um, chat GPT accounts, they might have a Claude account, they might have a Grok account, and they're using AI in their own personal workflows, right? And what I mean by workflows, just so you know, is anything that you do in your day at your computer terminal. You could be answering emails. You could be looking at documents and trying to build the tender. You could be writing a report. You could be analyzing a spreadsheet. Anything that you might do, building a PowerPoint presentation, right? People have discovered that if I help AI or use AI in those workflows that I do, I'm getting a massive speed boost and quality boost, provided that you're reviewing the work. Because again, they make a lot of mistakes. But for the mistakes they've made, as long as you're reviewing, learning where the models are really good at the end of the day, your work is becoming better and done faster. But one of the recommendations they have for companies is don't build these systems. Companies are pouring money in to try and build their own AI systems internally. Like, the models that are coming out from these companies are so good. Don't even try to compete. Just try and use the latest models in your work. And again, focus on these individual workflow improvements, right? So instead of trying to do, oh, we're going to have a massive AI for the company, look at people's individual workflows, look at your individual workflows. With David's class in the grant writing, we kind of called an audible during the course, and David asked, could someone pull up one of their grant applications and see if we can get AI to do it? And one of the complaints was they had the AI write a scope statement, but it just sounded robotic. It didn't look right. It didn't hit all the right connections. That's because the person was using a model that was older, and it was a model that wasn't good at writing. And I said, let's get the latest version of Claude, Opus 4.5, to take a shot at that. Let's tell it to write that scope statement passionately, and let's give it all the information. We did this, and in about 2 minutes, we had the scope statement done, and the person was marveling at it. They asked for it back because it was as good as they could probably have written it. It was done passionately, it focused on all the key points. And then we just quickly had it build a 10-slide presentation so it could do a review of this grant. We did this in minutes, and this would have taken someone a whole day to do. And it was done very well, right? It was done really well. So, one of the things that I think is important is not to train on any specific tool, but generally learn how these tools work, right? I see a lot of companies that say, "Oh yeah, no, we have Copilot, installed. We've got AI going." But if you're using Copilot, you're probably behind the curve, far behind the curve. Even the programmers at Microsoft aren't using Copilot, just to give an example, right? Stuff is moving so quickly. And there may be advances in Copilot all of a sudden saying, hey, they already have, all of a sudden Microsoft leaps everyone and has the best model. Then you kind of jump over, but it's trying to find out how everyone's doing and where you can use these smart models in your workflow right now. And what Matt had said in his blog article, which I think is true, if some of your job or all of your job happens at a terminal behind a computer screen, AI is coming for significant parts of it. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even at the end of this year, but within a couple years, that's happening. But we're starting to see that transition right now in some of the professional work, and definitely in software programming, but in a lot of other fields. So. We're going to have some questions coming up, but I wanted to talk about some key actions maybe that you can do right now. So it seems this change is happening fast. So what can you do to kind of get on this, start learning what's happening? The one thing that I would highly recommend is that you don't use the free accounts. A lot of people go to, ChatGPT, they go to Claude.ai, and they keep using the free models, right? What I would recommend is get a subscription. It doesn't matter to which company, right? And these are the $20 to $30 a month subscriptions. You can do that with OpenAI, with ChatGPT. You can do it with Anthropic and use the Claude models. You can do it with Google and use Google Gemini, or you can do it with Grok. You can do it with Perplexity. But go to one of these kind of frontier companies and these frontier models, get your $20 or $30 a month subscription, because often, two reasons. One is that your data is protected, right? If you're using the free model, they're going to train on the information that you're giving it. But two, and more importantly, a lot of times you don't get access to these strongest models, right, with the free versions. So you want to pay for those ones. And again, go directly to those companies. Don't use companies that are trying to sell you, for the most part, subscriptions to all these models. So a lot of them are kind of scam. Go to right to OpenAI, go right to Anthropic, go right to Google, or a couple of the other larger model providers. Get that subscription, start using that, right? And just personally, my model I use is Claude Opus, probably the most. But I do use GPT as well, and I use Google Gemini. But I'd say 80% of my work that I use for AI is actually done by Claude Opus. It's fantastic. Uh, Action number two is start using AI in your real workflow, right? And stop using AI as Google. It's not Google. I actually talk a little bit about a course that Dave and I are going to put on, but it's one of the things I talk about is AI is actually can be a poor Google sometimes. It can give inaccurate results. But when you give it good data, like you give it full contracts, you give it spreadsheets and full problems, you give it the context, it can do amazing things. And I think you might be kind of blown away. So it's something that you should try doing, is start taking some of your workload and seeing what the model can do. And again, for example, in that session that we had just a couple weeks ago for grant writing, we had it build a 10-slide presentation deck about the grant itself. What was the scope? What were the advantages that we were proposing for this grant? It was amazing. It was a beautiful PowerPoint presentation that would have taken someone half a day or a day to do. We did it in 30 seconds with Claude. So start giving it some of your real work. Start understanding its limitations. You will see limitations and you will get frustrated. That is absolutely correct. But you should be getting good results from it as well. And the last point I want to make is I think you need to jump on this now and kind of treat this as the most important year in your career, right? Um, there's going to be a shrinking window where these early adopters of AI in their professional workflows have an advantage. Soon the models, and by soon, hopefully years out, a couple years out, will start be getting better and better, right? And and that window right now where people that can understand how to use these models effectively take an advantage in their business or career will close. So the time is now to kind of learn, to be on the forefront and start learning kind of what's happening and keeping up to date. Really important, right? It seems like a lot, but one of the things the models will give you back is time, which is incredible, right? Because it will start doing like presentations that have taken you hours, you can do in minutes. You're going to have that time back to review that content, to work with the model, and hopefully time to advance in your knowledge of AI itself. So speaking about that, again, David bugged me for a year to have some AI content in his grant writing course, and we finally did that. And then he's been bugging me for months and months, saying, "Okay, we need to make a bigger course on AI." So I finally caved, and we put together a course for AI professionals, and we're actually launching our pilot next week. And the course has 3 sessions, so we're going to do it on March 19th, or excuse me, 12th, 19th, and 26th. And the 3 sessions are broken up into kind of logical steps. The first session that we're going to do on March 12th is we're going to talk just about the black box of these models. We're going to open the black box. We're going to look at how these models are built and how they operate. It's going to be like looking basically into the sausage. How is the sausage made? And we're going to spend the whole 2 hours of that session on that. It seems like a lot, but it's really important to understand because you're going to hear all these terms about pre-training, post-training, data centers. Why are they required? And then when it comes to prompting, well, why do I need to understand and how do I prompt the model? Um, in that first lesson, we're going to learn all about why you need to know that, and it will give you such good footing for everything else you're going to learn about AI. In the second session, we're going to talk about prompting skills. What do you need to know? And we're going to look at workflows and give examples. Okay, here's how you implement AI in those workflows. At the end of that second session, we're going to give everyone assignments to kind of get AI integrated into their professional workflows. And then in the third week, we're going to ask everyone to kind of report back and probably spend the first hour talking about the successes and failures in those workflows. David has says such good success in his grant writing course about having people do it and discussing that. It's extremely valuable. So we'll do that as a group for the first hour. And then we'll end off the course. I'll probably talk about the last hour. Okay, what are these latest models? How do you stay up to date? We'll go specifically through the companies. What models are there? Maybe show some examples of some of these tools that I was talking about specifically. And for each of these sessions, they're going to be 3 hours each, but we're going to stick around for an hour and have office hours. So David will put links to that course if you're interested in looking at it. That's one. There's a lot of other resources online. Another thing for staying up to date on my website, which is sedawk.com, sedawk.com. David will put a link in there. I have a news page there that's updated every day with the latest news. And the news is focused on professionals, right? And you might start reading the news going, oh, a lot of this isn't making sense to me. But after a couple weeks, you'll start learning the terms. After this course, you'll start knowing the terms and you'll start keeping up to date. So before we jump into some questions, and I'll hand it back to David here, there's kind of two key takeaways. And I just heard two really good quotes over the last month when talking about AI and jumping in. And the first one was, you don't learn to swim by sitting on a deck chair by the pool, right? And when it comes to AI, you really need to start using these models in your workflow. Like, get those paid subscriptions, start giving it documents, start working on it, interacting with them, and getting work done. You can watch so many videos of people doing it online on YouTube. You really need to start doing it yourself and getting that experience. So jump in that pool. And the other quote that I heard, which was great, using AI today is like riding a bike. To be stable, you need to be riding fast. And it's so true. You need just to keep up to date, start using these new models. And it seems like a lot, but once you pick up speed, you will be stable. And you'll realize that the faster you're learning, the better you'll be able to use AI and the more time you'll eventually have because it'll start helping you with your own workflow in your own business, right? And you will have that time to keep up to date with it. So that's essentially all I had. I was going to maybe hand it back to David here. Man, we've got about a little more than 10 minutes. We can field a couple questions if there are any. David, were there any questions?
There were, and I wanted to say, first of all, thank you very much, Leroy, for putting that together. If you appreciate that, please leave Leroy a thank you in the chat. But I wanted to get to some questions. We had some good ones around like protecting IP. Nicholas asks, Leroy, great question, good question. How do we make it sure that using Claude Cowork, for example, does not leak our intellectual property?
So if you're using the paid tools by all the subscribers, none of that data is used for training. It's not the case if you're using the free models, but when you're using the paid versions, you'll go in there in the terms of services. None of your information will be leaked. And I had this discussion with the executives at the conference. They were talking about this. You have to realize these are the same systems that all company data is stored on. Everything's in the cloud nowadays, anyways. Your emails in the cloud, your files are in the cloud, all the data you're working with in the cloud. It's the same with AI. And companies, like OpenAI, like Anthropic, realize, and especially Anthropic is very much corporate focused, even though they're again, a great writer. It's the company that I like the most. They're very focused on enterprise work. So there's enterprise level models with them, but all their paid colleagues, um, excuse me, all their paid services, all your data is protected. So treat it just like you would if you have data on Dropbox, if you're using email, if it's on an enterprise platform, it's all the same. I think your worries about IP were a concern when people were using free models. They used all the information. So if you're using ChatGPT right now in the free window, they collect that and they train on that information because they need as much data to train on. But if you're using a paid version, no worries about it. There's no worries about you losing IP when you're using it.
Oh, that's fascinating because there was one in the questions kind of similar. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to it, but it was basically when using a paid subscription, what do you see as the risk for feeding all your company information, including financials, into AI to write, could be grants or strategic planning for 5 years? Are there any other risks you
Same
see?
risk as you emailing a financial report to a colleague because that's going on the
Wow.
internet to someone's
Yeah.
server, right? Same risk as you storing it on Microsoft's file service. Same risk as you storing it on a SharePoint system in the company. The risk is, yeah, the same, which is minimal. I think it's something that was true again for the free models. It's not for the paid services. Another
Gotcha.
reason you need to use the paid services and treat it like any other enterprise level system. Remember, it's like your email. If someone has access to your account, then yes, they could look at that information just like if they had access to your email.
The next question is from Glenn. It's kind of an interesting one because you're showing all the different models, and Glenn's just like, "Look, I'm paying 24.99 a month for Chat GPT Plus. Is that 5.2 or 5.3?" And I'm assuming that just upgrades. Is that true or?
Yeah, so it's 5.2. The 5.3 is specifically the codex, which you can use on that, but you have to get a different piece of software called codex. It's specifically for programming, but 5.2 is their leading general thinking model right now. So you're definitely paying for, you're getting the best model right now. But if you go to OpenAI, you'll see something called codex. You can download it on your computer and use 5.3, but 5.3 is specifically for programming. But with your $20 or $29 a month or whatever it is now subscription for OpenAI, you can use that coding model as well and that environment. You can't use much, like you'll hit limits. That's the other thing too, you'll notice. So if you start using AI a lot, for example, let's take Claude, for example, you do have usage limits and you may hit those, right? So I pay for, I think it's $150 a month subscription I'm on the max plan for Claude because I use it so much, right?
Mhm.
Because I just, I would run into my limits all the time. I'm using it for programming. Claude went down yesterday for like a couple hours in the morning. People think it had to do with so many people moving over because of the U.S. military's stance on Anthropic. That so many people supported Anthropic and moved their Chat GPT accounts over. But for a couple hours, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'm using GPT in the morning because my Claude was down.
Leroy, Sandra asks a great question. She says, many of my colleagues are distrustful of AI. You know, how can like leaders that are on here in this distrust around AI, how can, what is your take on that?
Um, yeah, no, it's a good point, and I've met many people like that. I think first of all, people haven't experienced it, right? So they really don't understand it, right? But when it comes to distrust, I think the best thing, the proof is in the pudding. So, show them a product that you've made, show them a presentation you made, show them a financial spreadsheet that you made. One thing that's amazing, and here's a trick. If you like using Claude, there are now plugins for both PowerPoint and Excel for Claude. You can run Claude in Excel, which is amazing, right? So you can have it do a full financial analysis in Claude, and you'll see it editing the spreadsheet. You're just sitting there, watch it work, right?
It's
So I
unbelievable.
think that's the thing to kind of maybe change the colleagues' messages.
Mm.
And it's hard to do this presentation where you say all this stuff could be coming. Again, even if, let's say, all AI research just stopped today, they hit a brick wall, it's not getting any smarter. The tools we have now, right now, today, are very good and could really change a lot of your workflows. And again, for colleagues that are distrustful from I would first of all get experience myself and then show them how well you could do what, part of your workflow with it,
That's
right?
what
And they
happened
might
in our
be,
class, 2 weeks ago, where when you talked about that 10-page presentation being made in 2 minutes. For those of you who took my class, you know how we do a scope statement, a scope outline. So wrote a beautiful scope outline and then created a 10-page slide with like problems, beautiful images, graphically designed. It was just, it's a complete game changer. There's one question here around transferring AI information between models. I have a well-established open AI chat GPT. Can I use this to populate a new account with Claude?
funny. Go to my news page at SEDOC today. That's the top story. Claude released a tool today that allows you to import your memory from OpenAI to Claude if you want to use it, because you may have started all that. Like that tool just came out today, right? So if you go to the news, and that was one of the top news stories on my news page. So it's one of the great ways to keep that up. It's very timely. They obviously have been working on this tool. um, the other thing I would suggest, though, too, is look at ways. Those memory features are great, but also learn how to make them kind of portable. And what I do is I write files sometimes that if I need the model to do work with me, all the thing it needs to do is in those file. So if I need to go to ChatGPT or if I want to use Google to do something, I just pull that file over. It's great to bounce around and actually be comfortable using the other models because they're really good. And you don't want to keep using one model because they keep leapfrogging themselves. And you want to have that flexibility and knowing how these different ones work. So, as you get more experienced, you'll see. Like I've got multiple subscriptions now just because I have to do this basically for work. But you might find out that, oh, I'm going to get a Google subscription as well. $20 a month or $29 a month.
Leroy, I also want to let people know as we get near the end here about this course. Leroy, in addition to doing it, I think he did a really good price as well. It's going to be a $500 class, but this pilot there's a couple $100 off it. So it's going to be $300, but you have to use the coupon AI pilot. I put it in the chat. So just make sure you use that coupon because I don't want to have to, each I will obviously refund you, but make sure you put AI pilot in it. So thank you for doing that. Leroy, we have time probably for another question or two.
Sure.
Shauna had something on speaking about can you speak about the environmental aspect? It's the main worry of my colleagues.
Yeah, they should be worried, right? Uh, the amount of power that goes into these models is staggering, right? For compute, for training. And I think that's maybe what you're talking about when it comes to the environmental aspects. But the greenhouse gas emissions, like the amount of energy that AI could use over the next 10 years is unfathomable, right? It's nothing like we've ever encountered before. Like these data centers are huge. They're restarting nuclear power plants to power data centers, right? They're extremely power hungry. So it's definitely one of the issues to solve. I've been involved in a couple projects, on the West Coast where we've been looking at old hydro projects to reactivate them to actually power data centers, right? To have green energy doing it. And one of the things that will probably help us, it sounds crazy, but asking, AI will help come up with solutions as well. But it is right. It's a good comment. AI is not green right now. Like it is extremely energy intensive.
Leroy, well, let's leave the final word to you. And if you don't mind, just around, well, we want to end at a hard stop, but I thought the judgment was a very interesting point in your presentation. Like, it's almost sci-fi, right? Well, it is sci-fi where we have computers now coming up with judgment. You want to just sort of like leave us, I guess, on a message of hope. If some of us see them, of course, but if we don't see them, what's kind of a message of hope you can have for us before we sign off for today?
The message of hope, at least for the next few years, is that, you know, um, hey, you're going to use these models and they're going to do stupid things. You're going to realize that, we're not at the place yet where these things are going to be taking over. They're not going to be taking over your job. But the way I see it right now is if you understand the limitations, if you're good at using them, they essentially give you superpowers. They give you a promotion, an instant promotion. All of a sudden you're not doing a lot of the busy work that you were doing before with spreadsheets and presentations and writing. You're actually managing the AI to do that work for you, and it moves you up a level. And actually, if you're using it well, you will become smarter, not dumber, right? Because it can teach you things, and it's amazing. Like, it's really good. And if you're using it well, right now, and there's going to be this transition period, and that's going to be over the next 5 years. If you can use it well, yeah, you will do really well in your career. And everyone's heard the quote before: "You won't lose your job to AI; you'll lose your job to someone who knows how to use AI." And I think that's going to happen for the next few years. So if you become skillful at it, there's a lot you can do.
Yeah. Leroy, every time you speak to our class or this, it's a tremendous pleasure. And I know I can see by the comments, everyone's very appreciative of your work. And I see so many of you. I wish I could say hi to you. I know a lot of you. So thank you, Leroy, for coming. You're a gift. I swear you're a gift for people. So thank you. And if I don't see you in the class, the upcoming course, no problem. I'll see you in the future. Maybe some of you will see in the upcoming course. Thank you for coming today. And Leroy, thank you for doing this. Like, just thank you for
Yeah.
taking hours of building this and educating the public on AI. You are really top notch. So
Oh,
thank you, Leroy,
thank,
and thank you everyone else for attending today. Goodbye, everybody.
appreciate it. Thank you.